So, dear colleagues, hopefully um, you can see on your screen a slide that says Quests. That's the twinning project that we're currently running, Dora, myself, and Victor. Um, so, look, this training presentation, I've split it into two parts. There's a part one, which is what is the Horizon Europe Twinning Call? So basically, I've prepared a whole series of slides saying looking at the call text from the Horizon Europe work program and specifically the twinning call, trying to present that in more bite-sized pieces so you get an understanding about the call. That's part one. Then in part two, I it's all about how to try to write a competitive twinning proposal. So I really go into quite some depth about what are called the part B and the part A part for the proposal. I go into about how to structure a twinning network, how to structure the overall proposal. So uh, let's see. Can I? Yeah, great. So part one. And at the end of part one, we'll have a Q&A question and answer session if anybody has any questions about the call text. Similarly, at the end of part two, there'll be a question and answer uh, session. So, so part one, yeah. I'm going to kick off by giving a few examples of twinning projects. I'll then go on to talk about what's this context for the twinning within Horizon Europe. I'll discuss about the core basics, budget and strategic objectives. I'll talk about what the core text specifies with regard to consortium, widening countries, scientific scope. I'll then move on to talk about what the scope of the call talks about in terms of capacity building, mobility, and inclusiveness. Similarly, about impact, synergies, and evaluation. And then, yes, at the end, we'll have a sort of Q&A session about the call. So, firstly, some example twinning projects. I should add, there's been in Horizon Europe, there's been literally hundreds and hundreds of twinning projects. And now, with this latest call for 2026, it's anticipated that will be something like 200 or more twinning projects funded. So I obviously don't have the time and space to highlight all of them. Here, in a way, I'm doing a bit of shameless self-promotion. These are two projects. There's one called Susnano and Twisma. These are projects that I won a few years ago and which are actually close to completion. So Susnano, this has been a twinning project involving the University of Tirana in Albania where their research topic has all been about developing sustainable nanosensors for water pollution detection. And in their consortium, their advanced partners, they've had one ICN2 from Barcelona in Spain and Pulaski University in Czech Republic, which in fact is also a widening country. Um, what was quite nice, this was a specific twinning call aimed at Balkan countries, Western Balkan countries, and this was one of the first ever twinning projects won in Albania. Then the other project, just to highlight quickly, Twisma. This is one that I won in a call in 2022. This has involved Kharkiv, an institute in Kharkiv called the Institute of Scintillating Materials, and they've been working on developing new calorimeters for high energy physics based upon advanced scintillating materials. And in their consortium, they have CERN and a CNRS institution in Lyon. So those are just two. The three QR codes that you see on the right, if you later on go and look at those, they'll take you directly to pages of the European Commission's Cordis project database, and they'll take you specifically to lists of twinning projects from past calls under Horizon Europe. And there you can really investigate the other, as I say, several hundred twinning projects. You can find out about the project titles, the abstracts, the consortia, and the budgets they have. And if you're serious about preparing a proposal, I strongly recommend that you go and have a look because obviously that's where you can learn about how other successful proposals have gone about it. So some words about the context of the twinning call. So twinning is part of what's called the Horizon Europe Widening Work Program for 2026 to 2027. Uh, Widening, to give its longer title, it's widening participation and strengthening the European research area. What's the objective of widening? Well, it's kind of in the title. It's all about closing research and innovation gaps that exist across the EU. Some basic cool facts. So all Horizon Europe calls have a specific call identifier. In the case of twinning, it's this long um, string here, Horizon Wide Era 2026-02 widening 01. So when you go about registering for the call, you need to make sure that you're looking for this particular call identifier, and that's the one that you're registering for. This particular call twinning, it's what's called a coordination support action with lump sum funding. So coordination support actions, these are 100% funded. They typically normally fund activities. They normally don't fund research projects per se. It's more the activities around research projects or the capacity building around it. Although with twinning, it's a bit of exception there. As you'll see in a moment, there is something like 30% of the budget that can be allocated for doing a research project. The call opens on the 8th of January, so in 1 month's time, and the call deadline is on the 9th of April. Um, what that means is because it only opens on the 8th of January, I'm not able to, you'll see in a moment, I'll show you a slide, but I'm not able to show you like yet the official finalized work program. And I'm not able to show you the the practical way of actually registering for the call because it doesn't yet exist on the European Commission's portal. Um, With that said, I think some of you, or quite a few of you, attended my training, online training back in the spring about project management in the context of Horizon Europe. If you did or if you didn't, I recommend you go back to look at the slides, the videos I did then, because I do talk in detail about how to register for specific EU calls. So that's a good reference to go back and find out how you can register for this call if you don't know how to do it. Coming back to the slide, so twinning, yes, these are projects. The duration is 3 years, and it's what they call a bottom-up call. And this basically means that it's open to any field of science and technology, provided, and the proviso is it needs to be state of the art. It needs to be ambitious. Budget and expected contribution. So the indicative EU contribution per project is anywhere between 800,000 euros to 1.5 million euros. The total indicative budget for the topic, in other words, for the whole call, is 264.5 million euros. The Commission does say different budget requests are not excluded if well justified. But I would say in brackets, my own personal opinion, I mean, stick within 800,000 to 1.5 million euros. And in fact, to be honest, personally, all the twinning proposals I've done, they've always been 1.5 million euros. I think it's not usually whether or not you're successful with a proposal is not usually dictated by the budget. It's not like, oh, we need to cut the budget in order to win this project. Provided you have lots of activities, that you're ambitious, don't be afraid to ask for 1.5 million euros. With that all said, the Commission are expecting with this budget, these contributions, something like 200 or more projects to be funded. Some words about the strategic objective of twinning. So the Commission say it's all about enhancing networking between research institutions in widening countries and leading EU institutions. It's about raising research excellence and innovation capacity in a defined area, a defined research area. Um, and it's about strengthening research management capacity of the coordinating institution. Now, I'm sure for quite a lot of you who may possibly be scientists, you might think that this aspect about strengthening research management as being kind of secondary. When you're writing your proposal, I strongly warn you against neglecting this aspect. It's very important. It can be often how well you have that part in your proposal can be the difference between success or failure with your proposal. So don't neglect this aspect. Expected outcomes from twinning projects. So, I mean, it's in a way, it's almost repetition of the previous slide. It's about improving research excellence and capacities in widening countries. It's about reducing research and innovation gaps within the EU. It's about enhancing strategic collaboration with at least two leading institutions from different member states or associated countries to Horizon Europe. The expected outcomes are raised reputation and attractiveness of the coordinating institution, improved research profile of staff, including mobility and skills, strengthened research management capacities and structures. Some words now about consortium composition, what the, the Commission requires. So the coordinating institution, this needs to be a public research institution or university in a widening country, then you need to have at least two internationally leading partners from two different member states slash associated countries to Horizon Europe. You can have additional partners. This is optional for things like training, communication, knowledge valorization, intellectual property rights, if it's felt to be relevant. Who are widening countries? I'm not going to read all these lists, but look, there's widening countries within the EU. Mainly, they're in the sort of central eastern part of Europe, but they also include Greece, Portugal, and then of course there's quite a number of countries that are associated to Horizon Europe, sort of on the border of Europe, such as Albania, Armenia, Bosnia, and so forth, who are also considered widening countries and can also apply to this twinning call. Some word about the scope and scientific strategy. So the Commission are expecting you to clearly define the area of research and innovation targeted by your twinning project. They're expecting you to demonstrate the scientific excellence of all the partners in the chosen area. So not only the coordinator, but also obviously the advanced partners they're twinning with. And they're looking to you to explain how this twinning project will take the coordinator's research and innovation to a new level beyond state of the art. Some word about the types of networking capacity building activities that are funded through twinning. So it'll be things like short-term staff exchanges and expert visits, inward and outward mobility. By that they mean, if you're talking about ELTA, senior researchers, junior researchers from ELTA going to the advanced partners, but equally researchers from the advanced partners coming to ELTA. These can be short-term on-site or virtual trainings, workshops, and joint summer schools. It can be conference attendance and organization of joint events. Also dissemination and outreach activities to raise visibility. These are also eligible for funding within twinning projects. Some words about gender equality and inclusiveness. So the activities, the Commission is saying the activities within your twinning project, they should align with the gender equality plans of the participating institutions where applicable. They want to see the promotion of increased gender equality and inclusiveness in all project activities. And they want to track and report on participation of female scientists and underrepresented groups. In fact, when you have a twinning project, all staff members, all researchers, both from the coordinating organization, but also the advanced partners, they need to be their basic details, their names, dates of birth, email addresses, need to be registered into an online portal from the Commission. Some words about research management capacity building. So here the Commission is saying they expect to see a dedicated work package or task to strengthen research management in the coordinating institution. They should say that as a reference, you should refer to the research management roadmap / European competence framework for research managers to help you define what capacity building tasks to have.
Mhm.
Um, they expect that you're going to aim to establish or upgrade a dedicated research management support team within your organization. Some words about, as I said earlier on, these twinning proposals are coordination support actions, which normally don't allow the funding of research per se. It's more the activities around research. But twinning is one of the exceptions. Where the commission say you can have up to 30%, it's optional, up to 30% of your budget within the twinning for specifics of research projects. Um, Now, if you do this, and in fact, I say if, in my mind, it's not an if, you've got to do it. Yeah. In fact, this work package one, this research component is kind of it's going to end up driving much of the structure, the activities of your project. So although they say optional, I personally I'd say you've got to do it. Um, yeah, this research component it's got to be put into your work package one. 30% of the total budget for the whole consortium can be allocated for this. And out of that 30%, at least half of it, at least 50% needs to be allocated to the coordinator. Now, in this research component, this research project allows for development and implementation of new ideas, methods, or technologies. Some activities in the research and innovation component. So activities must advance the state of the art in the chosen field. All training directly related to advanced research innovation should be budgeted here. Use this component. And so when it says all training related to advanced, so things like if you're doing a research project, you'll no doubt have some expenditure for research consumables. You might even have some research equipment, small components that you want to buy. They can be put here. But whatever it is you're doing, use this component to build a strong scientific foundation for long-term collaboration with your partners. Um, Expected impact and indicators. So if you have any familiarity with Horizon Europe, you'll be well aware Section 2 in these Part B proposals, it's entitled Impact. It's more about the long-term effects, impacts of your project. Now here the Commission want you to describe in both quantitative and qualitative terms what will be the impact at, say, an institutional level from a twinning project. So if we're thinking sort of quantitative terms, it'll be things like, yes, publications, citations, peer recognition, collaboration agreements with non-academic sector, we'll talk more about this later. But there can also be other indicators, especially if you're sort of working in a field of science, which is, say, applied. Um, Other indicators will be things like maybe private investment being attracted for the research, intellectual property being generated, maybe some innovative products, services, and so forth. Mobility and human capital development. So already mentioned the project funds activities for inward and outward exchange of qualified scientists and young researchers. Um, These 20 projects, they provide an excellent opportunity for doctoral candidates and say young postdoctoral researchers. So it's very good if you're emphasizing that in some part of your work package or part of your proposal. And yes, these projects they provide access to new research avenues and creative approaches through leading institutions. Um, Stepping back for a moment, um, policy background. So all these different calls, I mean, we have the Widening program and twinning is a call within that. Um, Stepping back there for this Widening program, there's a whole sort of policy context, the policy background, which has been discussed, developed, and steers the call text, the calls that you see within the Widening program. And it's important that you go away and read some of these documents, these background documents, because in your later on in your part B, in your impact section, you'll want to make some sort of reference to these that show to the evaluator that you're aware of them and how your twinning project is helping to address those policy needs. So here are, say, three particular policy documents you should have some familiarity with, and you probably want to make some reference to in your proposal. The first is this, what's called the Second Era Policy Agenda 2025 to 2027. This is the 3-year roadmap for enhancing Europe's research and innovation ecosystem. There's a document called the 2024 to 2029 Political Guidelines. So this is sort of a document which highlights a whole load of, say, research areas of priority for the EU, everything from sort of defense and security to sustainable prosperity, democracy, social fairness, and this is another more general document to be aware of. And then another one that's an important one is what's called the competitiveness compass. So this is the European Commission's roadmap for restoring Europe's dynamism and boosting economic growth. So especially again, if you're in a scientific field which has a very applied nature, um, things like and can lead to the creation of, I don't know, new technologies, uh, economic development, you'll be wanting to make sure that you reference, for example, the competitiveness compass somewhere in your impact section. Um, Slide here, synergies with other funding programs. So in the call text, the Commission mentioned that they're keen, they welcome and are happy to see if you're, say, making a twinning proposal and you already have perhaps funding from other sources, and that somehow this twinning project is going to be complementary to these existing projects you have. So there'll be things like these existing funding programs or initiatives. There'll be things like the EU cohesion policy funds. There'll be things like smart specialization strategies that your country or your region might have. It may be other national or regional programs. It may also even be that there's certain private sector investment initiatives that somehow are relevant to your twinning project and your research topic. Moving on to say some words about evaluation and ranking. So the Commission say for each twinning proposal, there'll be apparently at least 4 expert evaluators. These would be evaluators from across Europe. There'll be researchers just like yourself. Um, when they evaluate the proposal, they'll be looking at 3 different uh, criteria. They'll be evaluating for excellence, impact, quality and efficiency of the implementation, which in fact are the 3 main sections of your Part B proposal. Each of those scoring sections they mark out of 5, and apparently because there'll be 4 of them, because there'll be about 4 of them, um, they're going to take. Sorry, just mute. Um, each of those criteria they mark out of 5. There'll be 4 evaluators. Often there'll be a spectrum of scores. Apparently they'll take the median of those scores, and then your overall mark will be out of 15. The question a lot of people ask is, well, what score do I need to get funded? The honest answer is it depends. It depends on the budget, it depends how many proposals are submitted. Certainly in the 2023 call, the funding and what they do is they evaluate all these proposals and then they put them in the ranking order with the highest scoring at the top running down. And they start distributing the budget from the top and they work their way down until they run out. Now, the point where they ran out in the 2023 call was somewhere in around about 13.5. So there were projects with 13.5. Some of them were fortunate enough to get funding. Some of them, unfortunately, they didn't. The call in 2023, the budget was smaller. Um, there was about 100 projects funded. This time we got 200. Um, but of course, what's happened in the meantime is we now have AI and lots of people using AI. So I can well imagine there'll be a lot more proposals. What will be this point where the funding runs out? I mean, it's a pure guess. I would say maybe, maybe projects with 13 will get funded, maybe even 12 and a half, but I can't imagine any lower than that. That's just my guess. The last bullet point here says ex-AQA proposals prioritized first by geographical diversity of coordinators among widening countries. So, um, in simple language, what this is saying is if you have if you have more than one proposal with exactly the same score in each of the different three criteria, let's imagine it was 13.5 overall and 4.5 in each of the criteria. Um, the way the commission will prioritize is they'll say, well, which proposal is, say, from a country which doesn't have yet any twinning projects funded or has the least, and that will then go to the top. Some key messages the commission is saying for applicants. So it's kind of obvious stuff. Build a strong complementary consortium centered on a widening country coordinator. Present a clear strategy for excellence, capacity building, and management strengthening. Design a coherent set of networking, research, and innovation activities with measurable impacts. Make sure you align with Horizon Europe rules, lump sum logic, and twinning specific conditions. So look, that's a bit of a quick, well, hopefully reasonably quick sort of step through the call text. As I say, in part two, I'm going to of this presentation, I go through and talk about writing a proposal and structuring a twinning consortium. But at this stage, I don't know, do any of you online, do you have any questions, any specific issues or concerns? I mean, no question is, I mean, there's no, I mean, we're going to say don't be embarrassed about asking questions because, um,
Well, maybe one quick question, which maybe you'll answer in the next part.
go
But
on.
is there any influence on, say, the number of consortia members? So two is the minimum, two other non-widening countries. Is there any benefit to having more, or it has no real impact?
I don't think, well, hmm, so I have to repeat, pause before I give the answer. My personal recommendation is to keep in a consortium. Um, in terms of advanced partners, research partners, my personal recommendation is to limit it to two. I mean, if you have a really, really strong reason, okay, have three, but I really wouldn't go above that just because if you win the project, it becomes more and more of a headache, to be honest, trying to do all these twinning exchanges with all these partners and trying to manage the consortium. I mean, to be honest, one of the beauties, I mean, I've been involved in many different EU funded projects over the last 20, 25 years. And, you know, it's an obvious thing. The bigger the consortium, the more headaches, you know, to run them. So I limit it to two advanced partners, and I've won plenty of twinning projects with just that number. So I don't think I wouldn't. There's no reason to feel insecure or thinking, "Oh, is that enough?" I mean, that's just the bare minimum. No, I would say, if at all possible, get two advanced partners who are really, really good in their fields. You know, that with very good publications, and you can clearly demonstrate the complementarity with yourself, and feel confident with that. Um, obviously, I'm I'm saying all this. I'm from a consultancy firm. I've helped to write proposals, and indeed, in the case of Quest, I'm actually a consortium partner. Um, and you might recall a few slides ago, it did say, you know, you can have additional partners who sort of So my company's in helping out with training, helping out on the project management, helping out on the dissemination. Um, you don't, how to say, the decision whether or not to have a consultancy to help you and have them as an explicit partner, um, it's very much a judgment call. It's really about almost like flipping the coin. I mean, I've seen instances where you you can have an evaluator who just doesn't like the idea of a consultancy firm being involved, and they'll mark you down because of that. But then equally, I've seen evaluators where they go on, they recognize the value and they say this is a plus. Um, So what am I trying to say? You can write a of course you can write a winning twinning proposal, and you don't need to have a consultancy firm in there. You can just go in like with the bare three of you, yourselves, the coordinator, and your two advanced partners, and you can win like that. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So there's a rather long answer, Christian. Uh, Okay, look, let's maybe move on to talk. If there's, sorry, no other questions, let's go on to talk a bit about the writing part, which obviously is the challenging part for all of us. So, look, in this second part, this is roughly the agenda I'm going to step through. So, I'll start to say some words about some essential documents. I'll then talk about how to structure a twinning network. I'll then say some words about how to structure the overall proposal in terms of excellence, implementation, impact, sort of framework, sort of high level view. I'll then go on to talk about the part B, which is the technical part of the proposal, which is the hard part, which has these three sections. I'm deliberately not going to do them in chronological order. I'm going to go section one, followed by section three, followed by section two, just because in terms of the real chronology of these projects, if you define the objectives for your project, you hopefully win it, you then implement it, and then in the medium to long term, it'll have some sort of impact. So to me, that's more the logical way, the natural way to talk about the proposal. However, with that said, in the actual part B, the Commission insists that the impact section is this section two. Um, I'm also going to talk about the part A, which is the administrative part, and where you have the budget. I'll then say some words about other sources of information where you can get more information to help you hopefully write a competitive proposal, where you can get your proposal even screened and checked. And then lastly, I'm going to say some words. So within Quests, I have a remit not only to give training, but also to give some hands-on support with some proposals. So I'm going to talk about an internal competition that we're going to have, where if you are interested, some of you are welcome to sort of participate in this internal competition, and whereas up to a maximum of three of Elta's twinning proposals, I'm going to give hands-on support to. So, okay, first thing, essential documents. Now, there's three documents here. There's on the left, you have this Horizon Europe Work Program 2026 to 2027. You'll probably also note straight away that running diagonally, it says draft. That's because, yes, it is the draft version, um, but it's a bit weird. It's the official draft version, if that makes any sense. I think it's just waiting. Well, it says a disclaimer that this draft has not been adopted or endorsed by the European Commission. I think it's basically waiting some sort of vote in the European Parliament, something like this. But in essence, although it says draft, the core text is not expected to change. If you do a Google search on Horizon Europe Work Program Widening 2026 to 2027, you'll be able to download the PDF. In the middle, it says Standard Application Form Horizon Europe Coordination Support Action. The version here it says 11, 16th of December. Wait. hopefully there won't be any changes, but when the call opens on the 8th of January, and assuming you register, if you're going to do a proposal, register on the portal for the call. Once you've done that, you'll then be able to download the definitive um, application forms for the Part B. But anyway, in the meantime, with this training, I'm assuming for now that it's based upon this version 11. On the right, what I'm showing you here, this is the lump sum budget Excel file, Excel tool. Again, be very careful here. Only once the call is open on the 8th of January, once you've registered, then you can download the definitive version, which is used for the call. Um, you can also, some of these documents, at least the work program, you'll be able to download from the European Commission's webpage, sorry, dedicated to twinning. The QR code will take you there. So, so now we can move on to the fundamental question, how to structure a twinning network. So you kind of obvious question, who will be the advanced partners in your twinning network that are going to help to boost the research and innovation capacity of your organization in your chosen state-of-the-art research topic? So how can you go about perhaps structuring your thoughts around that? Um, and basically, this is a figure, this sort of triangle figure. This is something I've used a lot in my proposals. I mean, it's pretty basic. Um, Later on in the slides, you'll see the actual version that we had for the Quest proposal, Quest project. But anyway, although it's simple, it's quite useful. If you're going to do a proposal, this is a sort of figure you can create quickly in Microsoft PowerPoint, and it's something you can share with your potential advanced partners. And it can help you basically to sort of structure your thinking. So I'm assuming here you're a consortium of three, coordinated with two twinning partners. If you have more twinning partners, the figure's going to get rather complicated. But at any rate, that's another reason why to stick to three. Um, but look, you're going to have to emphasize that you're all complementary to each other. So think of that complementarity in terms of expertise, but also facilities. And obviously, you're working on this particular research component, this project you're going to have in work package one. Emphasize all that complementarity from the perspective of this project you're going to do together. And then equally, this sort of figure like this is you can use it to help drive and explain coherently and consistently why you're doing certain trainings, why are certain your young researchers going from one partner to another, what kind of training, how does this somehow complement the research project, the research you focused on, yeah? So that's the sort of high level figure. This is all empty. Later on, you'll see the specific one we had for Quest. So there's some words about the twinning network. Um, Another key aspect, of course, is you think to yourself, well, how am I going to structure my objectives and work packages? So here you can think about what I would say is sort of an excellent implementation impact framework. So you're going to need to break the commission. They want these twinning proposals, they want you to have some sort of research and innovation strategy. Okay, fine. That's going to need to have a series of objectives that cover things like the research and innovation project you're going to have, the networking, the raising of research and innovation capacity, strengthening of research management capacity, etc. Those are all things you're going to be writing about in section one excellence. But at some point, you're going to have to map those objectives to your specific work packages where you do the implementation. That's the section three. And in turn, these work packages, they're going to generate results which need to be aligned with expected outcomes defined in the work program, the impact. So that's all fine and good. These are some bullet points, but here's a kind of figure, hopefully to kind of give you a high level view on that. So all these twinning projects I've done, I basically kind of followed this, in essence, this kind of structure, this kind of recipe. For the research and innovation strategy, I've kind of broken it down into about five objectives. So objective one, conduct state-of-the-art research on whatever your research topic is, your project. Objective two, here I here I kind of take the liberty. I thought it's important to show that there's knowledge transfer and training going on for the experienced researchers, but also the younger researchers, the early stage researchers. So I split those into two separate objectives. Um, then objective four, the Commission want to see that there's capacity building going on within the administrations on the management side. So that's important. Okay, so we give that a separate objective. And then lastly, somewhat more abstract or vague, the Commission talk about raising the coordinator's research profile. So, okay, great, that's important. We'll give that an objective on its own as well. Now, with each of these objectives, later on in the section 1.1 objectives, there'll be maybe half a page or more reading to elaborate on what those objectives mean. But here with this figure, what I want to get across is for each objective, to make life easy, I just go, oh, for each objective, here's a work package. You know, it's idiot-like. We make it simple, yeah? Very easy for the evaluator to they see an objective, oh, how's it been done? Oh, it's, you know, objective one maps to work package one, objective two to work package two, and so forth. And because of that approach, I make sure that the work package on project management, I always put that at the end, work package six. I know a lot of people put it at work package one. That's fine. It's just that the simple numbering mapping gets messed up if you do that. So my personal approach is always put it at the end. So, right, so we have all these simple work packages which map clearly to the objectives, and then each of these work packages, they're going to be generating results. We'll be able to define indicators for those. Things like research papers, months of exchanges, workshop numbers, training workshops, research proposals prepared, and yeah. So look, this is this is a kind of high level view, um, and it seems to at least it's not the of course it's not the only way to write a winning proposal, but this is something that's kind of worked for me over the years. Okay, we now move on to the part B. So the part B, for those who don't know, this is the technical proposal. This is where the hard part. This is broken into these three sections. The overall length of the part B, at least in the most recent standard application form, was 33 pages. But you'd have to double check, as I say, when the 8th of January comes round. The Commission does give recommendations of how many pages you should write for these different sections. So it's a recommendation, so you can deviate, but my personal recommendation is to try to sort of stick to it more or less as closely as possible. And definitely my warning is, from past experience of writing proposals over the years, it's very easy to get carried away and write too much in section three, the work package descriptions. Here it says recommended length 13 pages. I've often seen cases where people just write too much. On the other hand, I've often had experiences where scientists neglect the section two on impact. This is a section which, to be honest, it's the most blah blah. It's the most abstract, vague, at times seems least tangible. And so there's a tendency for people to neglect it, to not write enough. And I strongly warn you against that. So this section two in impact altogether, the EC is recommending 9 pages. Make sure you get 9 pages on paper, yeah. And then look, if you're struggling with the word page count of 33 pages, don't forget the cover page where you've got the title. It doesn't have to only be in the title. It can also be, you can start straight away with section 1.1 on the cover page. And usually with these twinning proposals, that's what I do, yeah. So, so this is a high level view of part B. I'm now going to step through the different sections, excellence, implementation, impact, and say, hopefully give you some ideas um, of things you might want to consider, might want to include. So, so section one, excellence, it covers things like objectives, it covers things like coordination and or support measures and methodology. Um, where I've got in the sub-bullets, I'm going to try to now illustrate with some concrete examples. So under objectives, they say you need to demonstrate the proposal's pertinence to the work program. Okay, great. A simple thing you can do, create a table. Create a simple two-column table like this. This is an example. This is from a twinning call back in 2021. In the left-hand side of the left-hand column, I copied and pasted important bits of text from the work program. And I stuck them in there. And then on the right, I said very, very concisely, look, this is how we're addressing that particular requirement. Or go and see this page or this section. Um, like I say, in general, it's quite, you shouldn't have an exhaustive number of tables in your proposal, but it is quite good to have a number just to break up. If you have endless paragraphs of text, that can be quite hard to read. So if you break up a bit your proposal with some tables, some figures, it just helps to make the readability that much better. So that's something you can do there. Um, in section 1.2, you're asked to explain why the research is important from a national and EU perspective. So, some recommendations here. So, look, concisely describe why the research topic is important. I think you should allocate maybe half to one page for this. Explain why it's important, both from a national level, say, and an EU level. So, from a national level, think about smart specialization strategy. Think about any national research and innovation strategies, policies that you might have. On an EU level, go and have a look at the research and innovation priorities that you have in Horizon Europe. And or you might want to think about referencing what are called European partnerships. These are sort of these European partnerships are typically public-private platforms. There's industry, there's funding from the EU, there's a whole load of them. Here on this slide, I've just mentioned a few of them. There's processes for planet, clean hydrogen, photonics, high performance computing, One Health antimicrobial resistance, but there's a whole load out there. If you Google search European partnerships, you can quickly get to a list and and find them. So this is clearly a way to sort of, if you can reference those, it's a good way to demonstrate why your research is important. Another sort of thing, a key thing to have in your section 1.2, have what's called a SWOT analysis. So SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. This is a simple example that I got here. The key thing if you're doing a SWOT analysis, um, for the strengths and weaknesses, the idea there is that you're sort of looking internally on your organization, your group, your department, your university, and you're trying to be as candid as possible about what those strengths are, what those weaknesses are. On the other hand, when you're talking about opportunities and threats, you're taking a more outward view. You're looking at and saying, well, what's going on in the outside world, in my country, in the EU? What are the opportunities, maybe in terms of public funding on a regional level or a national level or EU level or from the private sector? Similarly, when you think about the threats, what's going on are we in an economic, are we going through a recession or, what threats we have, war going on not too far away from us. Then, depending on your country and so forth, these are the sorts of threats you might want to talk about. But when you do this exercise, you'll probably have to do it iteratively, and do it not necessarily purely on your own, but maybe with some colleagues. And as you're developing this SWOT analysis, at the same time, at some point you're going to be linking this SWOT analysis to your research and innovation strategy and to justifying why you have those five objectives. So that's that once you've got your SWOT analysis and you've got all these numberings, at some point you're going to say, look, we've got objective so and so because it's addressing this particular strength or this particular weakness. Another thing to consider, so an example of how to specify scientific targets for the state-of-the-art research component. So you're allowed this work package one, this research component. Um, it needs to be state-of-the-art or beyond state-of-the-art. It needs to be ambitious. What I'm showing here is an example where it's a twinning project dealing with organic electronics. They were working on uh, thermally activated delayed fluorescence materials, or TADF, or OLED emitters. And so what I got them to do there was to say, look, over the 3 years with these materials, where are you going to try to reach? You know, what are the performance targets? What's current state of the art? Are you trying to get beyond that? And if so, you know, please quantify that. So we had a table like this, and that seemed to go down well. And with whatever research project you're proposing to do in your twinning project, think also in can you summarize the objective in some sort of quantitative terms? Yeah. So we move on now to section three implementation in your proposal. So in this section three, you got a subsection 3.1 about work plan and resources. I'm going to say some words there about some things you might want to consider for your work packages dealing with the exchanges. I'm going to say some words about the budget. Then there's a section 3.2 capacity of participants and consortium as a whole. So I'm going to show you the twinning network figure that we had for the Quest project. I'm also going to say some words and show you a table about demonstrating furthermore, the complementarity of a consortium in relation to your project's objectives. Okay, some words about so if you think back to that high level figure I had where I showed objectives and work packages and impacts, work package two was dedicated to exchanges with senior researchers and work package three for exchanges with junior researchers. Why I find helps is if you can try to make your work package descriptions as concrete as possible. So what I advocate here is, as far as possible, create some sort of secondment tables. Show how, if you're dealing with in the work package, say for the senior researchers, already have some sort of plan of who's going to go where in year one and year two and year three. Um, And likewise, try to do your best for the young researchers. Of course, with young researchers, it's going to be a bit difficult because there'll be PhD students. By the time you know, year two or year three of the project comes along, maybe some of them have left or some new people have come in. Um, you can get around that with these tables by indicating something like PhD student number one or number two, you know, if you don't yet know. But as far as possible, try to populate the table with real names, with real people who are really going to make exchanges. And that helps to give, I think, a greater credibility for your exchange plan. Okay, the twinning network. I already showed you a sort of a blank version. This was the version that we had for Quest. Now, Christian, you asked me sort of the kind of the question, what's the optimum number of partners? Yeah, we had with Quest, we had Linköping University and Loughborough University in the UK, but then very exceptionally, we had also two companies. Had my company, but also we had this SME, which unfortunately has subsequently gone bankrupt. But it was a company called Just in Mind, and they were included because they sort of had a specific role in the project that's been done relating to quantum reservoir computing. But anyway, look, this figure really, this is a figure we had, we started developing it early on in the discussions for the proposal, and then ultimately it went in section 3.2. of the proposal. And I think it's very good for the evaluators. It helps. They see in a figure, the saying people say a figure's worth 1,000 words, and I think with this figure, it really captures the essence of the project. So we had that, but also in 3.2, I'm not going to read all this text here, but this was literally the last thing on page 33, the last page of the proposal. We're trying to sort of demonstrate our, I was going to say, not desperation, but our eagerness to have this project. Even on the last page of the last of the proposal, we're still banging on about, look, we can do, we're the right people for doing this project. So, right at the end, we have this table on the left. We got these objectives from our research and innovation strategy, and then on the right, we're saying very concisely, look, we can do this because the partners have got these capabilities, contributions, complementarity, etc. Yeah. So look, I think that's kind of some ideas there for section 3. Oh no, there's still some word about budgets. Yeah. Um, right. In general, with Horizon Europe proposals, it's usually section 3.2 where you talk about budget. I usually try to include some sort of simple pie charts, just to help convey information quickly, hopefully to the evaluators. So things to maybe, if you do include pie charts, things you might want to consider. So looking at the pie chart on the left, this was a pie chart, in fact, that was just for work package 1 for the research component. Now I have to warn a bit because with the latest call of twinning, the commission is saying at least 50% of the budget needs to be for the coordinator. Going back some years ago, I think to 2021, the commission said it had to be at least 70%. Um, so in this pie chart, what you're seeing here, we had altogether something like 350,000 euros or so for this research component, and I very simply demonstrated that the coordinator had 71% because, let's say, we have this constraint of 70%. It was a bit extreme. Now with your proposal, if you have a pie chart, you'll be looking for, say, 51, 52% for the coordinator, and then maybe 24% for each of the partners, assuming you have 2 advanced partners. On the right, the pie chart here, this is just sort of focused on the person months. And again, what to say? Okay, I've written this bright yellow star. It says like for work package for project management, work package 6, keep it within 5 to 7% range. Yes, that's a sort of classic thing for all Horizon Europe proposals. To be honest, I know the reality is if you have these projects, it takes a lot of effort to manage them. But rightfully or wrongfully, when it comes to proposals, it's never written anywhere in the call text, but somehow the evaluators expect to see that the percentage of budget and person months lies somewhere between 5 to 7%. If you go above 7%, you run the risk of getting criticized that you've allocated too many resources for that. So just try to avoid that. Another comment maybe in this project work package 5, which is sort of dissemination and communication. Um, Often, and this is just a general rule, usually I think you're trying to keep it below 10% of the budget or the person month. I think in the case here with twinning, you can allow yourself to maybe go slightly above, but because they're expecting you to do outreach and things, and you're going to be going to conferences and so forth, and maybe running workshops with industry, you can go perhaps above 10%. But if you do that, make sure you write some words just to sort of justify why it's relatively high. Okay, so that's some figures about words about budget and pie charts. Let's move on to section 2, impact. So in impact, you've got these 3 main subsections of section 2.1, projects pathways towards impact. You have a section 2.2, dissemination, exploitation, and communication, and then you have a section 2.3 summary. Now, underneath each of these three sections, um, I'm going to say a few words or try to illustrate uh, these points below. So, for example, under section 2.1, contribution to expected outcomes in terms of qualitative and quantitative. I'm going to say show some examples there. You're also meant to write about potential barriers arising from factors beyond the scope and duration of the project. I'll say some concrete words about that. And then in section 2.2, I'll show you dissemination communication plan. That this is really kind of standard stuff, but I'll show you a bit of such a plan, a table, and then I'll say some words about strategy for management of intellectual property. And then in section 2.3, summary impact pathways, so I'm going to show you a kind of table figure which you might want to consider for your own proposals. So, firstly, section 2.1, qualitative contribution to expected outcomes. It's a very busy slide here. It shows 5 outcomes. I'm not going to read through each of them. All I want to say is these outcomes, I've copied and pasted from the call text from the work program. And what I strongly recommend is that in your section 2.1, you do essentially the same, and for each of these outcomes, you write 2 or 3 paragraphs in qualitative terms, explaining how your project, how your activities, how they're contributing to these outcomes. And this sort of qualitative part, I would recommend that you do about 2 pages. And this will quite possibly be the section of the proposal you'll find hardest to write. But nevertheless, I strongly recommend that you do that. So this is sort of qualitative, but we also have a quantitative aspect. So here, my recommendation is you come up with a table. Left-hand column, you indicate these expected outcomes. Again, you're copying the title of these outcomes from the work program. And then you think to yourself, well, and in thinking quite broad terms, what sort of things are going on in my work packages? What sort of results? What could arguably somehow be considered to somehow contribute to that particular outcome? And it may mean that certain indicators get repeated, not only for outcome one, but also outcome two, and so forth. So come up with it after you've done your 2 pages of the qualitative description, then have this table with the quantitative aspects. Some words. So you're also in this section 2.1, you're asked to write about potential barriers arising from factors beyond the scope and duration of the project. Now, my recommendation here is to think about barriers on 2 aspects. Think about your research topic, think about the scientific barriers you have there. So maybe identify 3 or 4 challenges, specific barriers that could somehow heed the implementation of your scientific research project in work package one. Um, if that's somehow not appropriate or an effort or doesn't quite work, another way you can approach this scientific thing is to say, go and have a look at these European partnerships I talked about. There's loads of them out there. Identify the 1 or 2 that's most relevant to your research topic. You do that. Most of these European partnerships publish things called strategic research agendas. And if you look in those, you can find information about more general challenges and barriers pertinent to a particular industry or scientific field. And that could be a reference point. You can reference those and write a bit about the barriers. And at the same time, we're referencing this European partnership. So, it's not coming from me, it's coming from experts. Yeah. So do it on a scientific level, but then also talk about potential barriers that exist on your country level. So describe 3 to 4 challenges, barriers that are maybe faced by your country's research and innovation system. And there, I don't know if it still exists, but in the past, there used to be a thing called Era Watch. And this was like a network of policy experts in research and innovation policy, and every year they write these reports about all that's going on a policy level, an economic level for different countries. I say I'm not sure they still exist, but do a Google search, see if you can find a report for Hungary, um, or maybe there's other government or EU documents. But draw upon those to identify some more barriers that exist on that country level. With all these barriers, be it scientific, be it country related, don't only describe what the problem is, what the barrier is. Also make sure you write very concisely some sort of mitigation measure that you can take to address that. Section 2.2, Dissemination Communication Plan. I mean, I think any of you who've worked on Horizon Europe, you would have seen these before. This is a very standard type of thing. I'm not showing here an entire table because I just couldn't fit it into a slide, but in your dissemination communication plan, you'll cover things like the promotion materials, the press conferences you'll have, project news, websites, conferences, research publications, and so forth. And you'll not only list what those results are, but you'll say you need to say what the target audience is for those, and then give yourself some sort of indicators of what you hope to achieve for each of those measures. Still in this section 2.2, you're also required to write about what your strategy is for the management of intellectual property. Now, here my recommendation is the following. Um, so you'll see on this slide two tables. There's one that says background knowledge and another that says possible foreground knowledge. The background knowledge is perhaps less relevant. It's the possible foreground knowledge, I say, is the really important one. For those who don't know, foreground knowledge is the name given to new knowledge that's generated through your research project. It's the information which will end up going to publications. It's the knowledge that might end up um, resulting in the filing of patents. What I recommend here is you, together with your consortium, is you create a foreground knowledge table during your proposal preparation, and you ask each partner what's the new knowledge that they anticipate to be producing during the project. And to write it very concisely in the table, indicate who's the partner responsible for it and who may be other partners who are going to be claiming ownership rights. And by having this table, it's very useful because if you win the project, you're going to have to create what's called a consortium agreement. And you'll have to go through this exercise of the consortium agreement. So if you already have it in your proposal, when you come to do your consortium agreement, you can literally just copy and paste it, stick it into your consortium agreement, and the job's basically already done. So have such a table like this, but also write some text about what will be the approach to ownership of intellectual property. And usually partners say, well, it's whichever partner is chiefly responsible for the creation of that knowledge. The last section in 2.3, in impacts. So you have to come up with a summary. In the standard application form for coordination support actions, in this section 2.3, the Commission has these tables. There's like two tables which they expect you to fill out. Now, what I did here, this is the example from the Quest project. We had real issues with space constraints. It was very difficult to get all the information into 33 pages. For the summary impact pathways for these two tables, we kind of end up squeezing together in essence. And the titles that you see in this table, this has come from the Commission. This things like specific needs, expected results, dissemination, exploitation, and communication measures. Those are all titles that are from this table from the Commission. Likewise, target groups, outcomes, impacts. I guess the only novelty was, as I say, there were two separate tables, and I kind of squeezed them in essence together. I think the important thing maybe to also mention is when you're thinking about specific needs for your twinning project, the obvious one, of course, is you're thinking about the SWOT analysis that you've done. That's a key driver. It's a key determinant for the specific need. That's very much you on a sort of selfish, your own level. Also trying to talk about specific need on an EU level. So in the case of Quest, it was all about quantum reservoir computing, obviously an example of quantum technology. So what we did was we went back and we investigated about policy documents. There's a sort of European platform dedicated to quantum technologies. We found they had a strategic research agenda, and from that we identified that this specific EU research agenda talked about the need for quantum technologies to deliver life-changing benefits for EU citizens in healthcare, energy, and cybersecurity. Okay, it sounds rather generic, but that we had a specific reference. This was something we could use to justify on an EU level. So whatever research topic you are working with, don't forget to also think about the EU level justification. So enough about the part B, the technical proposal. Let's move on to talk about the part A, which is sort of the administrative parts, and also where the budget gets put. So the things, some warnings, recommendations here. In your part A, check that the core topic, acronym, title, and duration are correctly encoded. This is obvious stuff. Make sure to select scientific descriptors to attract the right expert evaluators. Ensure that the participant data, what's called the participant identification codes, the PICs, and legal status are up to date in the portal. And make sure that you're consistent between your Part A and Part B and the consortium narrative. So, for example, whatever acronyms you're specifying for your partner organizations in the Part A, make sure it's consistent in the Part B. Likewise, um, budget figures, that's a classic one to get wrong. Have slightly different budget figures in your Part A. They're not consistent with your Part B, especially if there's late changes in the proposal. Make sure that that gets checked and you don't have inconsistencies. Also in the Part A, you need to write an abstract. So this abstract is about 200 words. As I say, today, let's be honest, today with AI, this is something that can be generated very, very quickly, but uh, nevertheless, it's still good to try and write it yourself by hand. In this abstract, make sure you mention the overall goal is about boosting the scientific prowess and innovation capabilities of your organization in whatever research topic it is. Make sure you mention about your excellent advanced twinning partners. Maybe say some words about what the project's key objectives are and what the project's long-term expected impacts are. Include three keywords that reflect both the science and the envisioned applications. Remember that the abstract is often the first text that the evaluator reads, so make sure it is appealing and it does hopefully sell well your project proposal. Some words about budget, but relatively superficially here. I'm not going to go into detail about how much budget should be. Well, I've already said some words about work package 5 and sort of work package 6, but I'm not really going to get too much into the budget for the other work packages. What I want to say here is if you don't have yet experience of doing lump sum funding, my advice is there's a European Commission website dedicated to explaining it. There's a training video, there's training presentations. The QR code on the left here will take you to this website where you can find that, where you can also find the lump sum budget Excel budget tool. Um, on the topic of the lump sum budget tool, so look, the QR code on the left, this will take you to the latest. I say the latest, but please again, wait until the 8th of January to make sure you've got the version that's going to be used for Twinning Call. This Excel file is something that you're going to have to fill out. You'll ultimately be filling out budgets for each of the partners, but also for each of the work packages for each of the partners. Um, Back in the springtime when I did my online training about project management for Horizon Europe, I talked a lot about this budget tool. And in fact, I even said it as a homework. Maybe one or two of you uh, did those homework exercises. If you did or if you didn't, I certainly recommend that you go back to that video, those training slides I did. You can find them on the Quest website. If you did the homework, go back and look at your homeworks you did and the feedback that I gave. This will help you for sure when you're doing your lump sum budget for the twinning call. Still on the subject about the budget, and this was something that was a key feature of that homework we did back in the springtime. But I highlighted the fact that there is something called the Horizon Dashboard for lump sum evaluations. Now, for twinning and for all these Horizon Europe projects, usually the bulk of the budget is going on personnel costs. And what the Commission have done is they've come up with a website and sort of database where an evaluator can go and check to see, oh, is that person month cost for that university in that country, is that is that correct? Does that lie in the right ballpark? So with this Horizon dashboard, the QR code will take you there. You can go in, go to the database. You can say, look, oh, I'm dealing with Luxembourg and it's a university or it's an SME or whatever. Fill in the details in the database, and then it'll tell you what is the 20th percentile, 50th percentile, and 80th percentile for person month rates for that type of organization in that type of country from past Horizon Europe proposals. So the trick here is, so this was developed for evaluators, but you as a proposal writer, I would say it's a good way to check and screen the figures that you're using for your organization and also for your partners. So if your partner in Sweden or wherever it is, if they're coming up with a person month rate which is between the 20th, 80th percentile, then you just think, okay, that's fine, no problem. If they have an amount above, which is not untypical, maybe above the 80th percentile, that's not to say that it's not acceptable, but make sure you write some sentence or two to justify why it's above 80th percent, above the 80th percentile. And usually it's pretty easy to do. You can say something like, oh, it's because there's a particularly high concentration or high number of senior researchers working on this project. Okay, but anyway, this is something to think about. So, enough words about budget for now. Part A, what else do we have? We also have ethics and security in the online forms. For the Part A, you have to complete an ethics self-assessment carefully, addressing any issues raised in your activities. If you're working in a field, well, especially something if it's to do with healthcare, medical, you'll almost certainly end up flagging certain ethics issues, which you'll then have to go and write some additional information about. Um, but also in this area, you're going to have to explain about how you'll manage personal data, if there's any dual use concerns on the technology you're working on, or safety related experiments. So finally, the last sort of bit here on this sort of training slides is so moving away from the proposal part, from the part A and the part B, I just want to maybe highlight some other sources of information where which could help you give you more insight, help you improve your proposal. So firstly, the one I want to raise here is um, go and have a look on the European Commission's portal where you have all these calls, both past and present. Look at the past twinning calls that there have been. Hunt them out, and not only will it'll help you to see what the past projects were, but what I find interesting is to go and look at what's, for example, the frequently asked questions. So whenever these calls are launched, you've got loads of potential applicants. A lot of them ask questions to the commission. And every time a question gets submitted to the commission, the answer has to be made public. So you can learn because there's all manner of concerns and queries going on. So um, probably maybe some of the questions that you've got, they've already been addressed, they've already been answered. So have a look at these FAQs, as I say, from past twinning calls. That's something good thing to do. Obviously, draw down the funded project lists, the QR codes I showed earlier on the slide that will also take you there. We can learn from that. Another important source of information. Usually, the commission does some kind of online event where they talk about the different calls in Horizon Europe. Um, this one here, this was the last, when at the last twinning call. In fact, there was a whole series of widening calls that went on in 2023 with a similar deadline in late September. And the commission did this big online event, and then they put the YouTube video up for the public to access. So if you do, no doubt there'll probably be one in January, I'm guessing, but it's also even interesting to go and have a look from the one from the 2023 call. So if you go on YouTube, do a search on Horizon Wide Era 2023 Access, Twinning Bottom Up, something like that, I'm sure you'll find the video. And then lastly, what you might not know about, this is also a very, very good source of bits of information about twinning and widening in general. So there's an EU funded project called ncpwideera.net. That's the website, ncpwideera.net. This was set up as a network for the national contact points for the Horizon Europe Widening Program. Now, it's been going for several years. Um, you can register for their free newsletter. Um, these newsletters give lots of useful background info, not only about twinning, but other widening calls. Um, That's free, but also very, very interesting. You can make use of their free expert pre-screening facility for Horizon Europe proposals. So already now, I think for 2 or 3 years, if you're preparing a proposal for a widening call, you can submit it to their expert pre-screening, and they'll give you some expert feedback. So that may also be interesting for yourselves. On the right here, there's a sort of figure showing sort of twinning projects that were won in the 2021 call. So this is also something that in the e-newsletters you from time to time, once a year, there'll be some sort of statistics about how many have been won in different countries, and that can be quite interesting. So look, okay, that's I don't know about quick, but an hour's worth sort of talking about part A and part B, and hopefully it's for those of you who don't know anything about twinning before, hopefully that is a good starter about how to structure a proposal, how to form a network. For those of you who already have experience of twinning, hopefully there's some little tidbits of information or ideas that maybe help you to strengthen particular sections of your proposal. Now that to run this training, what I'd like to talk about is this internal competition that we're going to be running. So something like up to a maximum of three of Elta's coordinated, Elta's led 20 proposals will be selected for hands-on support from me. I mean, oh, by the way, of course, this is optional. I'm not forcing anyone this upon them. But if you're interested in some hands-on support from myself, this is what I'd like to see. So look, send me an email. This is my email address, and send me a project charter. In essence, an abstract about your project. It should be somewhere between 1 to 2 pages. Send it to me no later than 5 o'clock on the 8th of January, so which is when the call officially opens. And these are the things I'd like to see in this project charter, this abstract. So I want you to write some words about the scientific topic. And the way I will assess it, because I was never an expert in quantum reservoir computing requests. or all the other twinning projects. I've never been an expert in those particular fields, but to help me make some sort of judgment on that, I want to see what kind of publications do you already have in that field? Yeah. And then maybe also write about the publications that your twinning partners have. Yeah. Um, so I want to see, and I want, because I want you to demonstrate to me, this is state of the art that you're working on. But I also want you to demonstrate, look, how it's important from an EU perspective. So please, make some sort of reference to EU research policy priorities. In particular, maybe go and have a look at current or recent Horizon Europe work programs and say, look, I'm working on this field and it fitted perfectly, or it will fit perfectly in this research topics in pillar whatever challenge in 2026 or 2027. Or you might say, well, look, in back in 2024 and 2025, there were calls under Horizon Europe. This research topic was a hot topic. Yeah, that's what I want to see. Then on the consortium side, yeah, please tell me about your advanced partners. Why are they high quality? What publications do they have? But what I also want to see is that you have some evidence of some sort of past collaboration. It doesn't have to be a previous, it could have been a past Horizon Europe project, but it doesn't have to be. If you can each sort of show, look, with this particular professor or this scientist, we did a publication together some years ago or quite recently. So, we've worked together. We're not starting from scratch. But look, we want to have this twinning project because there's so much more we can build upon. We can do so much more, yeah? That's what I want to see and hear a bit about in the consortium. And then in impact, yeah, please don't neglect about the research management capacities, the type of activities you maybe have in mind for that. And also, please go away, have a look at some of those EU policy documents and say some, in concrete terms, how might be this research topic is relevant on the societal, environmental, and/or uh, economic terms. So this is totally optional. There's no obligation. If you want to do it, please send it to me by the 8th of January. I promise to give back to those who submit my feedback by the 14th of January. And yeah, look, I think as I can't emphasize enough, it's optional, but I think there's more resources I can show you. There's more specific text I've used in past proposals. Um, and I think there's ways I could help with up to three of you. So okay, a lot of talking from me. I don't know. Are there any questions from yourselves?